Captain James Walker stood at the bridge of the UES Defiant, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched Mars burn. The red planet's surface glowed with countless impacts as the Dominion's forces overwhelmed humanity's last major outpost beyond Earth. 15 years of war had led to this moment, and despite all their preparation, all their sacrifices, they were losing. "Sir, Olympus Base reports critical shield failure," Lieutenant Adams said from his station, his voice tight with tension. "They're requesting immediate evacuation support." Walker's jaw clenched. Olympus Base housed over 10,000 civilians, scientists, engineers, and their families who had been vital to humanity's war effort. The base had been designed to withstand months of siege, but the Dominion's new plasma weapons had torn through their defenses like paper. "How many transport ships do we have in range?" Walker asked, though he already knew the answer. The holographic display showed their fleet's positions clearly. Too few ships, spread too thin. 3 transports, sir. Maximum capacity of 2,000 per ship. 6,000 people would have to be left behind. Walker felt the weight of command pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden. "Send the transports. Priority to essential personnel and children." The words tasted like ash in his mouth. The bridge crew worked in grim silence, coordinating the evacuation. On the main screen, Walker watched as 3 bulky transport ships descended through Mars' dusty atmosphere, their shields flickering under constant fire from Dominion fighters. The enemy ships were beautiful in their own alien way, smooth, organic shapes that moved like sea creatures through space. The Dominion, a coalition of elder races, had perfected bioengineering centuries ago. Their ships were living things, grown rather than built, with reflexes that made human vessels seem clumsy in comparison. "First transport loaded, lifting off," Adams reported. "Second transport beginning." "Sir." Multiple Dominion dreadnoughts entering low orbit. Walker leaned forward, studying the tactical display. 5 massive Dominion ships, each one large enough to swallow a small city, were moving to cut off the escape route. Their distinctive tentacle-like appendages writhed with charged energy, preparing to fire. "Order all combat ships to concentrate fire on the lead dreadnought," Walker commanded. "We need to keep that corridor open for the transports." The space between Mars and the Dominion fleet lit up with human railgun fire and energy weapons. The Defiant shuddered as it unleashed its main cannon, a stream of hyper-accelerated tungsten shells designed to penetrate the Dominion's biological armor. But for every wound they inflicted on the alien ships, the damage seemed to heal almost instantly. The Dominion's bioengineered vessels were self-repairing, another advantage that had helped them push humanity to the brink of extinction. "Second transport loaded," Adams called out. "Third transport reports." "Oh God." Walker saw it too. A Dominion fighter had slipped through their defensive screen and launched a plasma torpedo directly at the third transport's engines. The explosion transformed the ship into a miniature sun, taking with it the lives of hundreds who had been waiting to board. "Sir, Olympus Base reports they're about to be overrun," Adams said quietly. "They're initiating Protocol Zero." Protocol Zero, the destruction of all sensitive data and technology to prevent capture. Walker closed his eyes for a moment, knowing that many of the base's personnel would choose death over falling into Dominion hands. They had all seen what happened to human prisoners. "Signal the remaining transport to lift off immediately," Walker ordered. "All ships prepare for emergency jump to Earth coordinates." As the Defiant turned away from Mars, Walker watched the massive explosion bloom across the surface as Olympus Base's fusion reactors detonated. The blast took with it thousands of lives, but also erased any trace of humanity's most advanced research facilities. "Plot a course for Earth," Walker said, his voice steady despite the hollow feeling in his chest, "and send word to High Command. Mars has fallen. We need to prepare for the final defense of Earth." The stars stretched into lines as the Defiant jumped away, leaving behind a graveyard of human ships and broken dreams. But in Walker's mind, the gears were already turning, planning the next battle. As long as Earth still stood, humanity would not go quietly into the night. The promotion ceremony lasted exactly 3 minutes. In the underground command center beneath what remained of Old London, Walker received his Admiral's stars, while emergency sirens wailed in the distance. The room was filled with grim faces, the remaining military leadership of Earth's combined forces. "Congratulations, Admiral Walker," General Roberts said, his voice carrying no joy. "Now tell us how we're going to survive this." Walker turned to the massive holographic display showing Earth's orbital defense network. Hundreds of satellites, defense platforms, and ships formed a protective web around humanity's homeworld. It looked impressive, but Walker knew it wasn't enough. Not against what was coming. "The Dominion will arrive in force within 72 hours, Walker said, pointing to the projected invasion routes. "They'll expect us to fight like we did at Mars, spread our forces thin trying to protect everything. We're not going to do that." He touched the display, highlighting key defensive positions. "We're going to concentrate our fleet here, here, and here. Maximum overlapping fields of fire. And we're going to deploy our secret weapon." The room grew even quieter. Everyone knew what he meant. The neural interface program that had been kept hidden from the Dominion for years. "The interface is untested in full combat," Admiral Jones objected. "Half our pilots can't even handle the basic neural load." Walker nodded. "That's why we've been selective. We have 50 ships equipped with the advanced interfaces and crews trained to use them. They'll form our main strike force." The neural interface was humanity's one advantage. While Dominion ships were biological marvels, their pilots still relied on conventional controls. The interface let human pilots connect directly with their ships, turning them into extensions of their own bodies. The reaction times were incredible, but the mental strain was enormous. "Show them the combat footage," Walker ordered. The hologram changed to show a training exercise. A neural interface pilot in an outdated fighter was engaging 5 automated drones programmed with Dominion attack patterns. The human ship moved in ways that seemed to deny physics, reacting to threats before they fully developed. The drones were destroyed in under 30 seconds. "This is what we can do," Walker said. "What they don't know we can do." General Roberts leaned forward. "And you're sure they don't know about the interface?" "Positive. Everyone who knew about the program was at Olympus Base. When they triggered Protocol 0, all data was destroyed. The only working interfaces are the ones we smuggled to Earth months ago." The room erupted in rapid discussion. Walker let them talk, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The Dominion would come in force, expecting to find a broken enemy ready for harvest. Instead, they would face humanity's ultimate expression of defiance. "There's something else," Walker added, silencing the room. "We've begun installing automated defense protocols in all major cities. If we fail up here, Earth will not fall easily." Everyone understood what he wasn't saying. If the orbital defense failed, Earth's cities would become death traps for any invading force. Humanity would not be enslaved. They would burn their own world to ashes before surrendering. "The civilian evacuation to the underground shelters is proceeding," a colonel reported. "We'll have 60% of the population protected within 48 hours. It wasn't enough, but it would have to do." Walker looked at each face in the room, seeing the same mix of fear and determination he felt. "The Dominion thinks they've broken us," he said quietly. "They think Mars was our last real defense. But Earth is our home. This is where we make our true stand." He expanded the tactical display, showing the vast array of ships and weapons humanity had gathered for this final battle. It was everything they had left. Every ship, every weapon, every trained pilot and soldier. "Send word to all commands," Walker ordered. "Operation Thunderbolt begins now. May God have mercy on us all, because the Dominion won't." As the commands went out and the room emptied, Walker remained staring at the display. Somewhere out there, the Dominion fleet was approaching, confident in their victory. They had no idea what humanity was truly capable of when pushed to the absolute edge of survival. Dr. Emma Reed's underground laboratory hummed with energy as banks of computers processed the latest neural interface test results. Located 3 miles beneath the Pacific Ocean floor, Project Phoenix's secret facility was humanity's last hope for a game-changing weapon against the Dominion. "Show me the results from test subject 26, she said, rubbing her tired eyes. The holographic display flickered to life, showing brain scan data from their most promising pilot. Neural sync rate at 92%, her assistant reported. Reaction time reduced by 85% compared to baseline. But, he paused, pointing to a red section of the scan. Mental strain is still critical. Emma studied the data with a frown. They were so close to a breakthrough, but the human brain wasn't meant to process information at these speeds. Every test subject who pushed past 90% sync showed signs of severe mental stress. The lab's security door hissed open, and Admiral Walker strode in. Even here, 3 miles under the ocean, he wore his full uniform. Emma knew what his presence meant. Time had run out. "Dr. Reed," Walker said, "I need good news." Emma gestured to the brain scans. "The interface works better than we ever hoped. Human pilots can react almost instantly to threats, predict enemy movements, and control their ships like they're part of their own bodies." "I'm hearing a but coming," Walker said. "But," Emma confirmed, "it's destroying their minds. The neural load is too high. We're asking human brains to process thousands of combat variables simultaneously. No one can handle that kind of strain for long." Walker walked to the observation window, looking into the testing chamber where a pilot sat connected to the neural interface. The man's face was twisted in concentration as he ran combat simulations, his mind linked directly to the ship's systems. "How long?" Walker asked. "At maximum sync, maybe 2 hours before permanent damage begins, 3 hours before total neural collapse." Emma pulled up more data. "We can reduce the strain by lowering the sync rate, but then we lose the reaction advantage that makes the system valuable." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "Show me the combat effectiveness numbers again." Emma brought up the comparison charts. A single pilot at 90% sync can outmaneuver any known Dominion ship. The biological advantage of their vessels becomes meaningless when our pilots can predict and react to their movements before they happen. And at lower sync rates, even at 60%, we see major improvements over standard controls. But it wouldn't be enough to turn the tide. We need the full neural connection to give us a real advantage. Walker turned to face her. "The Dominion fleet will reach Earth in less than 48 hours. I have 50 ships equipped with your interfaces and crews waiting for deployment orders. I need to know if we should use them." Emma felt the weight of countless lives resting on her next words. "The interface will work. It will give us the edge we need in combat. But," she took a deep breath, "we have to tell the pilots the truth. Using this system at full power will damage their minds. Permanently. They're volunteers," Walker said quietly. "They know the stakes." "Knowing you might die in battle is one thing," Emma argued. "This is different. We're asking them to sacrifice their minds, their very identities. Those who survive will never be the same." Walker's expression hardened. "And if we don't use the interface, what then?" Emma looked at the simulation chamber again. The test pilot was being helped out, his nose bleeding, hands shaking. But the combat results on the screen were undeniable. He had destroyed an entire squadron of simulated Dominion ships without taking a single hit. "Without the interface," she admitted, "the Dominion fleet will overwhelm us through sheer numbers and biological superiority. We'll lose Earth, just like we lost Mars." "Then we have no choice." Walker straightened his uniform. "Prepare the systems for full deployment. I'll inform the pilots of the risks." As the Admiral left, Emma turned back to her data, searching one last time for a way to protect the pilots' minds. But deep down, she knew the truth. Humanity's last hope for survival would come at a terrible price. The briefing room was packed with 300 pilots, their faces illuminated by the harsh glow of emergency lighting. Tom Miller sat in the front row, his experienced eyes fixed on Admiral Walker as he explained the neural interface technology. After 15 years of combat against the Dominion, Miller had seen enough to know when leaders were hiding something. Walker wasn't hiding anything now. He was laying out the brutal truth. The interface will give you capabilities beyond anything we've ever achieved, Walker said, his voice echoing in the silent room. But the cost. He paused, looking at the faces before him. The cost will be severe. Miller glanced at the pilot next to him, his old friend Jack Torres. They'd flown together since the war began, survived countless battles. Both of them knew what severe meant in military language. The neural load will cause permanent damage to your minds, Walker continued. We estimate 2 to 3 hours of combat time before critical failure. Some of you may not survive the strain. Those who do. He took a deep breath. Those who do will never be the same. The room remained silent. These weren't young recruits anymore. Everyone here had seen what the Dominion did to captured worlds. They'd watched Mars burn. They knew Earth was next. This is strictly volunteer, Walker emphasized. No one will think less of you if you walk away. We need 50 pilots. The rest will fly conventional ships in support roles. Miller stood up. All eyes turned to him. He was well known among the pilots, a veteran with more confirmed kills than any other human pilot alive. Will it work? He asked simply. Will it give us a real chance against them? Dr. Reed stepped forward from the shadows. Miller had never seen her before, but he'd heard about the scientist behind Project Phoenix. In simulations, a single interface-equipped ship can outmaneuver and destroy multiple Dominion vessels, she explained. Your neural-linked reactions will be faster than their bioships can respond. But, she hesitated. But we'll lose our minds doing it. Miller finished for her. He looked around the room at his fellow pilots. Well, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'd rather lose my mind saving Earth than keep it and watch everything burn. One by one, other pilots stood. Jack Torres was next, followed by pilots Miller had flown with for years. Soon, the entire room was standing. 300 volunteers, knowing they were signing away their futures. I need you to understand what you're agreeing to, Walker said firmly. This isn't just death in combat. The interface will change you. Your memories, your personality, everything that makes you who you are will be affected. With all due respect, sir, Torres spoke up, we've all lost enough to the Dominion. Friends, family, whole colonies. What's a few memories compared to saving what's left? Dr. Reed stepped forward again, her face showing both admiration and sadness. The interface preparation will take 6 hours. We have equipment for 50 pilots at a time. The first group needs to be ready for neural mapping within 30 minutes. Miller looked at his watch. The Dominion fleet would arrive in less than 2 days. They would only get one chance at this. I'll take first shift, he said, then turned to his fellow pilots. Anyone else ready to make history? 49 hands went up immediately. Walker nodded to Dr. Reed, who began organizing the volunteers into groups. As Miller followed her toward the testing area, he caught Walker's eye. We won't let you down, sir, he said quietly. I know you won't, Tom, Walker replied, using his first name for the first time in years. Just try to come back to us, if you can. Miller managed a smile. Someone has to teach the next generation how to fly. He didn't add that he might not remember how to fly himself after this was over. As he walked down the corridor toward the interface chamber, Miller thought about all the pilots who had died fighting the Dominion. At least this way, their sacrifice would mean something. Earth would survive, even if the price was their sanity. Tom Miller's world had become pure light and motion. Connected to his ship through the neural interface, he didn't see space through a viewport anymore. He was space. His consciousness spread through every system of his fighter. feeling shield levels and weapon charges as if they were parts of his own body. The Dominion fleet had arrived exactly where Walker predicted, their massive bioships spreading out in their standard attack formation. They had no idea what was waiting for them. "Phoenix Squadron, engage at will." Walker's voice came through, sounding distant and almost unnecessary. Miller could feel his wingmen through the tactical network, 50 minds linked together in ways no human had ever experienced before. Miller's ship, he couldn't separate the two anymore, dove into battle. The Dominion cruiser fired its plasma cannons, but Miller was already moving before the energy burst left the alien vessel. The neural interface let him sense the power buildup in enemy ships, predict their attacks before they happened. "This is incredible." Torres's voice crackled through the comm. "I can see everything they're going to do before they do it." Miller watched as Torres's ship danced through a storm of enemy fire, impossible maneuvers that would have torn apart any normal pilot. The interface let them ignore human limitations. G-forces didn't matter when your brain was directly controlling the ship. The Dominion forces quickly realized something was wrong. Their biological ships tried to adapt, changing tactics, but the neural interface pilots were always 2 steps ahead. Where before it had taken 5 human ships to match 1 Dominion vessel, now single pilots were taking down multiple enemies. But the cost was becoming clear. Miller felt blood trickling from his nose, his head pounding with each passing minute. The neural load was like a burning weight in his skull. "Phoenix 3 is down," someone reported. Miller saw one of their ships drift silent, its pilot's mind burned out by the interface strain. Then another fell quiet, and another. "Keep fighting," Miller commanded, his voice rough. "Make it count." He pushed deeper into the enemy formation, his shots finding weak points in the bioship's armor that normal sensors couldn't detect. The interface let him feel the pulse of their living vessels, understand their patterns in ways no human ever had before. The main Dominion battleship turned its attention to Miller's squadron, its massive form rippling with defensive energy. Normal tactics would have called for retreat, but Miller wasn't flying normal anymore. "Follow me in," he ordered, and felt rather than saw his remaining squad mates form up behind him. Their minds linked through the interface, moving as one unit, predicting and covering each other with inhuman precision. The battleship's defenses were sophisticated, layers of living armor and energy shields. But to Miller's interface-enhanced senses, they might as well have been made of glass. He could see every power fluctuation, every vulnerable spot. "Target these coordinates," he sent, sharing the data directly through the neural network. 20 ships fired as one, their shots threading through gaps in the defenses that existed for microseconds. The Dominion battleship's hull cracked, biological armor failing as critical systems were hit. Miller felt a fierce joy as the massive ship began to break apart, but the sensation was distant, fuzzy. His thoughts were starting to slip away. "Admiral," he managed to say, "the interface, we're losing cohesion. Can't hold much longer." "You've done enough." Walker's voice came back. "The main fleet is moving in. Fall back to repair stations." Miller tried to acknowledge, but forming words was becoming difficult. His memories were fragmenting, pieces of his life falling away like leaves in a storm. He couldn't remember his parents' faces anymore, or his first flight, or Tom. Torres's voice cut through the haze. "Stay with us. Fleet's moving in. We did it. We showed them humans can't be beaten." Miller turned his ship toward home, operating on instinct now. The last thing he clearly remembered was watching the main human fleet engage the broken Dominion forces, knowing that for the first time since the war began, humanity had a real chance of victory. Then everything went dark. Dr. Emma Reed stared at the alien data scrolling across her screen, her hands shaking as she realized what she was seeing. The Dominion battleship they'd captured hadn't just contained tactical information. It held the entire reason for the war. "Admiral Walker," she called into her comm unit, "you need to see this immediately." While waiting for Walker to arrive at her lab, she checked on the medical bay monitors. 30 of the interface pilots were still alive, but most were lost in their own minds. Tom Miller lay motionless in his bed, his brain scans showing strange patterns that no doctor could understand. The lab door opened, and Walker strode in, looking exhausted. The battle had been won, but the cost had been enormous. "What did you find?" he asked, coming to stand beside her desk. Emma pulled up the translated Dominion files. "This is from their central database. It's their original threat assessment of humanity, made 50 years ago when they first discovered us." Walker leaned forward, reading the alien text. His eyes widened as he understood what he was seeing. "They were afraid of us," Emma said quietly. "Not of what we were, but of what we could become. Look at their growth projections." The screen showed a chart comparing various species' development rates. The human line shot upward at an angle that dwarfed all others. Their predictive models showed that humanity would surpass their technological level within 3 generations, Emma explained. "They've been watching us for decades, seeing how quickly we advance, how we adapt to new challenges. So they attacked us before we could become a threat," Walker said grimly. "Yes, but it's more than that." Emma brought up another file. The neural interface proved them right. No other species they've encountered can merge with machines the way we can. Our brains are more flexible, more adaptable than any they'd studied. She showed him brain scans from the interface pilots compared to alien neural patterns. "We can process combat data faster, react more quickly, adapt to new situations in ways their biological ships can't match. We're the first species they found that could potentially surpass their biotechnology." Walker was silent for a long moment, studying the data. "So they tried to wipe us out before we could reach our full potential. And in doing so, they forced us to develop exactly what they feared." Emma laughed bitterly. "The neural interface would have taken us decades to discover in peacetime. The war pushed us to create it now, out of desperation." She pulled up the medical readings from the surviving pilots. "But the cost. The interface is destroying their minds because we're pushing the technology too far, too fast. We're asking human brains to evolve in hours instead of generations." "Can they recover?" Walker asked softly, looking at the medical readings. Emma shook her head. "The changes are permanent. The interface didn't just damage their minds. It rewrote them. They're the first of something new, something that might be closer to what humanity is meant to become. But the process is killing them, or worse." The Admiral walked to the observation window, looking down at the medical bay where the pilots lay. "They knew the price. Every one of them volunteered, knowing what it might cost. And they saved Earth," Emma added. "The Dominion fleet is retreating. Our conventional forces are driving them back now that their advantage is gone." She paused, looking at her data again. "But this isn't over, is it?" Walker shook his head. "No. Now that we know what they feared, we know this war won't end until either humanity is extinct, or we prove we can exist alongside them as equals." He turned back to her. "How long until we can safely use the interface technology?" "Years of research, maybe decades. We need to understand how to help human minds evolve naturally to handle the neural load." She looked at the medical bay again. "These pilots, they sacrificed their futures so humanity could have one." "Then we make sure their sacrifice matters," Walker said firmly. "Humanity has proven we can't be easily destroyed. Now we need to prove we deserve to survive." 1 month after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Walker stood before the newly built memorial wall. 50 names were carved in gleaming black stone, though only 30 of those pilots still lived. In some ways, the survivors had paid an even higher price than the dead. He walked slowly past the beds in the long-term care facility built next to the memorial. Tom Miller lay in the 3rd bed, his eyes open but unseeing. The doctors said his brain was still active, processing information at incredible speeds, but he couldn't connect with the outside world anymore. The neural interface had changed him into something else, something perhaps more advanced than human, but trapped inside his own mind. "Any change?" Walker asked the nurse, checking Miller's vital signs. He responded to his name yesterday, she said hopefully. Turned his head when we said it. It's more than we've seen in weeks. Walker nodded, remembering the confident pilot who had led the charge against the Dominion fleet. Miller had stayed connected to the interface longer than any other pilot, directing the battle until the enemy finally broke and ran. By the time they got him out of the cockpit, most of his memories were gone. The door opened, and Dr. Reed entered, carrying her latest research results. She looked tired but determined. "We're making progress," she said without preamble. "The data from the interface pilots is helping us understand how human minds can evolve to handle the neural load. In a few generations, our children might be able to use this technology safely. But not in time for them," Walker said, looking at the rows of beds. "No," Emma admitted quietly. "What they did, they compressed generations of neural evolution into a few hours. The human mind isn't meant to change that quickly." They walked together to the observation window. Outside, construction crews were rebuilding the city. The Dominion's retreat had been total. They had fled back to their own space, leaving humanity bloodied but unbowed. "The Defense Council wants to continue the interface program," Walker said. "They think we need to be ready if the Dominion returns." Emma's face hardened. "Show them these beds. Show them what it really costs. We won something amazing here, but if we don't learn from it, we're no better than the Dominion. Sacrificing lives for power." A sound made them turn. In his bed, Miller had begun to speak. His words were jumbled, mixing combat data with fragments of memories. The nurses said this happened sometimes, moments when the barrier between his enhanced mind and his human consciousness grew thin. "Enemy formation. Changing," he mumbled. "Mom's apple pie. Shield frequencies. Remember the sunset on Mars." Walker moved to his friend's bedside, taking his hand. Miller's eyes focused for a moment, showing a flash of recognition. "Did we win?" he asked clearly, his voice weak but present. "We won, Tom," Walker said, squeezing his hand. "You showed them what humans can do. Earth is safe." A slight smile crossed Miller's face before his eyes went distant again, his mind returning to whatever strange realm the interface had created inside his consciousness. "They're heroes," Emma said softly, "not just for what they did in battle, but for showing us what humanity might become, and what it costs to rush that evolution." Walker walked back to the memorial wall, touching the names carved in stone. "I've ordered all interface research to focus on safety and natural development. No more shortcuts, no matter what the Defense Council wants. We'll reach that next step in our own time." Outside the window, the sun was setting over the rebuilt city. Humanity had survived its greatest challenge, proving they could stand against the most powerful force in known space. But the price of that victory lay in these beds, brave men and women who had sacrificed their futures so humanity could have one. "The Dominion feared what we might become," Walker said quietly. "These pilots showed them why. Not because we're stronger or more advanced, but because we're willing to sacrifice everything to protect what matters." He looked at the peaceful face of his friend Tom Miller. "We'll remember them, all of them. And we'll make sure their sacrifice guides us toward becoming something better than what the Dominion feared we would be."